Day 26, March 26th, 2024. Pages 569 through 586. Let's begin today by tolerating some prose that's just like every bit of narrative writing out there, and therefore dismissible. There were suckers with suddenly soft centers, suckers hard as glass, and transparent too when smartly licked. There were suckers the size and shape of paddle balls, reds made hot through some indeterminate spice, intense and bracing spearmint. Slow caramelly melts, thick double chocks. I remember pans of fudge in regimented squares, shatters of peanut brittle, flat slabs of maple sugar, each surface roughed with raisins, chopped nuts, currants, bits of glazed fruit, coated with shreds of coconut like frozen blades of grass. Sugar seemed the center of all satisfaction, and I am inclined now to regard it as a symbolic substance. Well, not as a substance, really, rather as the ultimate adverb of value. Grainy as sand, soluble as salt, sugar was nevertheless a softener, not a sharpener, of sensation, taming the acidulous fruits, cooling the spices, smoothing the sharp, rough edges of brickles and crackles, warming ices. Of course, as I hope is clear from the strength of this prose, I was being sarcastic. To a reader like me, the entire 650 pages of the tunnel would be worth a read just for that one clause, shatters of peanut brittle. Interestingly, the same reviewers I've encountered who griped at the ordinariness of the narrative also groused at the postmodern hijinks of the first 100 pages. As if one weren't postmodern enough, and the other were too postmodern. I think I get the charges of the ordinariness and straightforwardness, though, because the narrative does not bewilder in the manner of, say, Gravity's Rainbow, and the prose doesn't exult in polyglot splendor like Finnegan's Wake, that other long-time work in progress that surely drew expectations of the tunnel in the wrong direction. Gass, like Emerson, wants to draw our attention to the poetry of the quotidian, enchant what is all around us. It seems that a precedent of obfuscation in ambitious novels led some astray. Because they could read it and understand, ostensibly at least, what the prose was talking about, it was thus deemed anticlimactic, simple, superfluous. On the other hand, I think some of the dismissal of the tunnel is the unfortunate result of reading too fast or too much at once. It's a sad truth of human nature that we tend to pretty quickly get used to amazing things to the point of not seeing them anymore. We get used to beauty to the point of blindness. So it follows that since Gass endeavored to craft every sentence of a 650-page book to his Olympian standards, we are presented with a sensory overload unless we find the right calibration of page count and reading time. I am reading this book for the second time at a frequency that will allow me to finish it in 31 days, and I can honestly say that at 26 days in, it's too fast. But I can also say some of the plan worked very well. For example, we tend to start a book slowly and then rush its ending. So to circumvent this impulse, I doubled up on daily reading for the first half of the month, and then cut it in half for the second part of the month. This worked out to roughly 30 pages a day for the 1st through the 15th, and then 15 pages a day for the 16th through the 31st. This really worked well, as the enthusiasm of the initial ascent, or perhaps descent, of any read is propulsive despite the density. And with the tunnel, its density increases, so cutting down on the numbers of pages ingested at a time proves a worthy tack. The more I consider it all, the more I feel the audiobook does do the additional service to the reader. It just may well work best to follow the lead of the MP3 divisions and read the tunnel across 46 days, using the tracks to calibrate your reading speed of each day's pages to the slower, measured pace of Gass's voice and cadence. On the average, this will work out to an hour of reading each day for 46 days. Any faster and you face many risks. Any slower is probably only warranted if it's not your first time reading it. It's tricky finding the golden pace that will both keep you in a book and keep it fresh. Consider the difference between going to the Louvre for 12 hours in one day versus 1 hour a day for 12 days. These practical considerations could be all the difference between wishing something would finally be over and wishing that same something would never end. But perhaps I just have a palate for the particular sugar that Gass provides. As Kohler says in today's pages, sugar slid things past the palate so agreeably a person might willingly swallow a roach. Clarice Lispector, anyone? Or a smart remark from a spiteful spouse if its frosting were creamy and rich and thick enough. This section, Sweets, continues to resurrect his childhood in the candy shops in such an immediate, palpable, visceral way that even though some of these memories couldn't possibly coincide with my own, I did not visit candy stores as a kid, I feel as though I am remembering my own life. The details are once again so rich and evocative and, well, romantic and charming. I liked to flatten the foil and smooth out its wrinkles with my thumbnail. He's talking about Hershey Kisses wrappers. Then I'd pile the squares in stacks like sheets of silver in a mint. They glittered so grandly, aspen-like leaves of light. One sees, hears, feels, touches, smells these foil stacks. And just in case we're not picking up on the intensity of the pleasure of this childhood candy, Gass is ready to meet the challenge. The candy, he proclaims, makes a second genital of the tongue. Yes, I know, and I know that too. But this crowning statement sets up for the deeper reflection of the narrative. What in literary studies is called the ceremony of innocence, the moment the boy is disillusioned by Araby in Joyce's story of the same name. As Kohler puts it, you wonder, after all, if it is worth it. The many blocks walk on such a cold, dull day, the loss of loose change, a perhaps too hopefully expectant state of mind, just for this bit of butterscotch, this nub of hazelnut, this soft blob of perhaps unmerited reward, this precious though transient gift of pleasure, ruinous to the teeth, the figure, the complexion, but prized because in a life so founded on the continual useful operation of the senses, there was this pure, inherently idle, injudicious, and indulgent sensation. This, then, is the Gass guarantee. His runs of reader-indulgent prose will, at some point, culminate and resolve in an observation that goes beyond the aesthetic and the ephemeral. And reading this specific passage again, he may well be conflating the sugar with Kohler's writing. I am reminded, too, that one must pay attention, stay alert, and fondle details. For when he says, "Some sweets grew stale when they were overlooked, when they were mislaid. They furred the way the state of Arkansas drew lint." That last statement is going to be a real head-scratcher if we didn't note the flung puzzle piece earlier in the book. As the narrative continues, young Kohler's innocence is further stripped by name-calling that brings an end to his skipping. All the while, Gass offers up fun puns. A mo you considered for a moment, Bonnie. And more 4D imagery. Cellophane makes a happy sound while being unwrapped, like a little hearth fire crackling. Its true visual is the crinkle of a smile. But lead and tin foils, whose every fold fractured the light, were my favorites. I caressed the paper, soothing its soul, as it were, pressing on those outer edges which had often been twisted toward a knot. In the midst of this change from youthful ignorance and puerile bliss to the confines of knowledge and shackled joys, tension is ratcheted up as young Kohler begins the slippery slope of pilfering money from his parents' secret treasury, a box under their bed, with the idea of replenishing it with his allowance. We all know how this particular story goes, and, as goes without saying, Gass captures and renders it with aplomb. It's a story of greed overcoming caution and the battle between reason and desire. In gambling for our passions, chance doesn't ever win, only the house. All of this leads to a short but spectacular Platonic discourse. There are forms, and there are copies. Thus the pain which pleasure is accused of covering up, such pains of the spirit as melancholy, helplessness, ennui, which can fill life like an atmosphere, all the hurts of the unloved, the loneliness of rented rooms, the emptiness of a stored bowl, tarnish on an idle knife, are themselves a response to the fact that life without candy's secondary pleasures is bleaker than the moon, even if one has carried out every plan and exercised every talent, done one's duty and then some. We would rather cozy up to a copy than close in on a form. Something is wrong with the way the world has been made when, in addition to the doing of desirable deeds, there has to be the melting of some sweet reward in the mouth. It will not suffice to be in love if you can't hold that love with floured hands and roll it into a breakfast bun or crust for pie now and then. So we all require a spoon or two of sugar to sugar the sour truth that sugar is a necessity, that simple sufficiency is insufficient. That sentence continues to linger in my mind. We would rather cozy up to a copy than close in on a form.